Hey guys, Eric here with driverlineup.com. Doing a video that I've been wanting to do for a while, but I just haven't had the right opportunity. I wanted to make sure that I hit on all my points, and being that I'm on now the fourth day of being broken down with my truck in the shop, sitting here in a hotel, I kind of got a chance to be able to really think this through and make sure that I present all my points to you, and the fact that I'm in the shop is going to give me a great talking point as well. So today's video is about why I chose to go lease after training. And before I get into it, I want to make sure that you guys can come join us at driverlineup.com. It is a social community we built. It's built by prime drivers, for prime drivers, past, present, future, or anyone who just wants to hang out with a bunch of prime drivers. You can head on over there to driverlineup.com, set up an account, you're good to go. It's got a great mobile app. Also, if you find this video useful, if you're thinking about joining Prime, feel free to use my driver code. It is ODOMEJ. And you can text me at the phone number below in the description. I won't answer that phone if you call. I never answer that phone. But you can certainly text me with any questions you have. So why I chose Lease. Now, I came into Prime almost 2 years ago, and I came in fully intending to be a company driver. I chose that as an option when I signed up, when I filled out the application. I chose company in orientation when they kind of said, do you want to go lease or company? I put company, and really kind of intended to be a company driver through most of my PSD and TNT training. So what changed that? Well, my PSD trainer was a company driver and my TNT trainer was a lease driver. So I kind of got both worlds. I got a good taste of both worlds, right? And the way that the two trucks ran was vastly different. And the feedback that I got from both drivers just kind of led me to where I went, which was lease. And I didn't make that decision until about 2 weeks before I went into upgrade. In fact, I was going company all the way up until I had hit my, at the time, 30,000 miles in TNT, and was waiting for the call saying, come to Springfield and get a truck. I was going company up until that point. But just wanted to kind of point to the way my PSD driver ran his truck and the absolute lack of liberty that he had. And you company drivers out there may be watching this, maybe it's not the same for you. I don't suggest that my PSD trainer has to run the way that all company drivers do. I don't know that that's the case. I'm just telling you the way that he had to run. And while I was in his truck, because it was the only thing that I'd ever experienced, I didn't know that there was any different world. Like, that was the only world that I knew. So in PSD, first of all, there was no question that he was forced dispatch. It was, here's the load, you're going to run it this way, here's where you're going to get fuel. If your reefer needs fuel, you have to go to a fuel stop, call the fuel desk, and get that pump opened to fuel that reefer. So if it was an unplanned stop, you had to call and get permission to do it. You had your whole route planned out for you because you had your fuel stops you had to go to. I felt like he had to fuel more often because there was just he could only get so many gallons of fuel at one place, and that would be just enough to limp us to a place where we could get X amount of gallons of fuel at the next place. And he just had to run hard. And when he wasn't training, he was chasing 3,000 miles a week. And oftentimes the loads that he was running, now granted I was only with him for like 2.5 weeks, but the loads that he was running were not what I would consider the greatest loads out there. I'll just put it that way. He also had a truck that was completely falling apart. I mean, he was in his third year, and because he was chasing miles, if something went wrong with the truck, he wasn't quite so motivated to get it in, because he knew it was going to take a couple days, and he had to get the miles. I mean, he had to get the miles. So it was just always miles, miles, miles. All the conversation was miles. I want to try to get 3,000. As soon as I get, if you want to stay with me on TNT, we're gonna try to run 6,000 or 7,000 miles. It was just always miles. And like I said, when I was on that truck, I didn't know any different. That was basically that was all I knew, because I didn't know, I hadn't been on a lease truck. But I think what had a profound influence on me is seeing the way that company truck ran, and listening to him talk to me about what he made and how he just had to chase those miles, and the way that he had to run his truck. And then going to a lease truck for TNT was like night and day. When I got on that lease truck, my trainer's name was Adam, great driver. He was a great trainer. He knew how to get out of the way and let me try to be a good driver when it was safe to do so. And then he knew how to jump in there and really guide me and teach me on the things that I didn't know. And he never once got upset. If I ever had to wake him up because I felt like I was in a bind backing up or something, he never got upset. Great trainer. So I get on his truck, and miles to him were not, like, he never even considered miles. To him, it was all revenue. Miles were, it was just never a discussion. It was never a how many miles is that, other than to pre-plan, of course, or pre-trip, to plan your trip out. Obviously, then you have to take miles into account, especially if you're a solo driver. But it was never, gosh, I didn't get enough miles this week, or here's how many miles I would rather this load be. It was never a conversation about miles. It was always a conversation about revenue. Secondly, he had just ordered a brand new truck. So, he's finishing this lease. He was thinking he would get probably about $15,000 for lease. He had some damage to his seat and some couple things here and there that he thought would cost him a little, but he was expecting to get about $15,000. And I think he did get a pretty good chunk, because I did keep in touch with him. In fact, I texted him the other day. He's still driving for Prime, still doing great. So he had ordered a brand new truck, and he had talked about that, how you can order a new truck 6 months into a lease. You could go a year with a Freightliner and decide you want a brand new 2021 Peterbilt. So there was that freedom. Also, if he found cheap fuel, if it was very cheap, and he wanted to go ahead and fill the tanks to get ahead on the next week, well, that might mean that he's spending more than he needs to complete the trip that he's on, but he just bought really cheap fuel for the next week. So it's going to be a wash, and he's actually going to save money that way. But he had that freedom to do that, and because he had that freedom to do that, if he wanted to take a completely different route, a different way to get from point A to point B, he could do that. On days that we wanted to get caught up on laundry, we would agree, okay, let's shut down for the day. He could do that. There were a lot of things. If he wanted to take home time, or he had kids and stuff, if he needed to go deal with something, he'd make a call and he'd go do that. So I think the freedom there was something I started having a really difficult time coming to grips with letting go of, knowing that I was about to go back to company once I upgraded and have to run my truck the way that my PSD trainer ran his truck, and would lose everything that I'd gotten used to on that lease truck. I had a really difficult time with that. So that really kind of steered my decision. And plus, just being with him kind of made me realize it's not something you should be afraid of. I was terrified of lease. You go do your research online about Prime leasing before you go to Prime, you can be terrified of, you're just buying a truck for Robert Lowe, and you're paying for something you're never going to have. You're just throwing money down the drain, and you're always going to be paying for this or that. You're never going to have any money. You're going to be a slave to that truck. You guys know all the things you see out there. But he had really kind of helped me understand that, and I was a business owner before I came to Prime, so I know how business works. But it just really embraced the fact that a lease payment is, okay, yeah, you're renting something that you can't tangibly own afterwards, unless you do an ACE 2 lease, you're doing a lease purchase. But just a standard lease with Success Leasing, it's not an asset that you're going to own. And yeah, you're paying $4,000 plus per month for that lease, but that's no different than renting an office, right? And I've rented offices before for my businesses. Well, if you're arguing that leasing a truck with Prime is just paying for a truck for Prime, then you should make the same argument about renting office space. There's someone who owns that or who has a mortgage on that space, and you're paying their mortgage. You're paying for their land. You're paying for their building. That's the cost of doing business. So to me, I really kind of embrace the fact that leasing a truck or renting a truck is the cost of doing business. It's no different than leasing an office. The truck is my office. It's how I conduct business. It's how I create profit. So I really started to embrace that and realize that it's not something I should be afraid of. And if I didn't like it, I could go back to company. So within that last 2 weeks of TNT, I did make the decision to go lease. And when I upgraded, I went into a brand new, had 400 miles on it, I think, Freightliner Cascadia. Went and got all the things I needed, got all those things financed. They came out, load locks, chains, all that good stuff that came out in some weekly installments. But I owned all those things, so I had no problem with buying them and went on my way. And as it turns out, all of the things that I kind of learned through TNT and was hoping would roll over into my experience with Lease is exactly what happened. It was very lucrative and profitable for me. And still to this day, it's why I will never go company. I will never go company. I do not want to chase miles. And I've said this in my videos before. I actually seek to run as few miles as possible each week while maximizing my revenue and my profit. So if I can get $7,500 in revenue, now I'm a team truck, of course, but if I can get $7,500 in revenue running 4,500 miles, then I'm not going to go run 6,000 miles to get $7,500 in revenue, right? I mean, you would want to only run the 4,500 miles because as a lease truck, I have to pay for those mileage. I pay mileage. And you pay the fuel, and there's the wear and tear on the truck. So I don't chase miles. As a solo driver, I ran approximately 2,300 miles. Sorry guys, my dog is scratching herself over here. But as a solo driver, I ran an average of 2,300 miles, and that was plenty. And as a team truck, we run an average of between 4,500 and 5,000 miles a week. And that's plenty for us. Now, a lot of team trucks, they want to run a lot more, but all the money for our truck comes to us. We don't pay anyone externally because we're a couple running a truck. But that's one of the biggest things for me is not having to chase miles. If I had to stress when I was a solo driver, like, oh my gosh, I got to hit this 3,000 miles, it would have drove me crazy. And if I had to stress as a team truck, like, hey, we need to get 6,000 or 7,000 miles a week, we'd have to run a lot harder than we do. And like I said, now running a lease truck, if I find that cheap fuel, you guys know what I'm talking about, those Road Rangers and Loves on I-80 and down south in Illinois. I think I paid like $1.12 a gallon the other day. I didn't need to get a full tank of fuel, but I did because it was $1.12 a gallon. Why am I going to pay $1.39 a gallon a day or two later in Ohio or Pennsylvania when I could get $1.12 a gallon? Now, granted, that meant that I paid a little bit more for fuel on that pay period than I needed to, but on this pay period, I don't have to buy that fuel, so it kind of washes out, and I get that liberty, I get that freedom to do that. About 6 months into my Freightliner Cascadia lease, I went ahead and placed an order for a brand new 2021 Peterbilt. I had that freedom to go to the truck that I wanted, the color that I wanted. I was able to put my graphics on it, my company name, get that truck really outfitted the way that I wanted to be comfortable for me to run the way that I like to run. I had that freedom. If I want to take downtime, if I drop off a load and we're exhausted and we want to just chill out for 8 or 10 hours, I just send a message to the fleet and say, hey, change our PTA to 2,200. I take that time off. If I want to go home, whenever I want to go home, I say I'm going home and I'm going to be home for 6 days, 7 days, 10 days. I'm responsible for paying for that truck, so I can do what I want to do. I have that freedom and that liberty. And that, for those reasons, I could just not I just couldn't be a company driver. I couldn't give up those things. Now, all that said, there's certainly some challenges with leasing, and I'm not going to be a lease fanboy and pretend that there aren't. I mean, there's definitely some challenges. One being that you're responsible really for the maintenance and mechanics of your truck. And I am in the shop right now over some issues with my truck, and I've been in the shop. It's been in the shop for 4 days. So you get that downtime, and it can really hurt you, and you just got to be prepared for it. You got to have some money in either your emergency fund, or in my case, I am my emergency fund, so I keep that money set aside to be able to get through these weeks. Also, you're going to have weeks where you don't make any money. In fact, you're going to have weeks where you go in the hole. Now, this week was timed right for me, so I'll get a little bit of a check, probably $1,000 from last week, and then we should be on the road tomorrow, which is Friday, so I'm not going to be in the hole, but I may get next to nothing on this next paycheck. So you're going to have weeks where you don't make anything, or you're even a little bit in the hole. But then you're also going to have weeks where you're getting $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 checks, very realistically. So it's not consistent, but it is more profitable for you as a driver in the long run. In fact, I was just telling someone the other day, I said, realistically, when I was a solo driver, even when I ran 25 days and then took a full 7 or 8 days off, I was still bringing home after taxes about $1,250 a week average, including the week that I took off. So having all that freedom and that liberty, while still maintaining a little bit better than I think what a company driver would be paid, to me is worth all the risk. So, if you need the consistency, if you need a paycheck every single week, maybe company's for you. If you can't look at a 3-month trend and let that be the consistency for you, then maybe leasing's not for you. And there's nothing wrong with that. That works it just works. People need different things. I don't want to live paycheck to paycheck, and I don't look at it from week to week. I look at it from quarter to quarter and annually. What did I make this year? What did I make this quarter? Do I have money in the bank? Am I profitable? Those are all the things that I look at, and yes, it is very profitable. And now that I run a team truck, it's very profitable. So I just couldn't do company, guys, and I never look back and say, I wish I would have made a different decision. I'm so happy that I made the decision to go lease. All the nonsense you read out there about leasing being a ripoff, or you're just buying someone else's truck, it's just nonsense. I mean, you are a business. You're going to have business costs. And you need to look at it that way. You need to look at it as you are an LLC. You are a company that's not an employee of Prime. You have a service contract with Prime to deliver freight for Prime, but you're not an employee. You're a company, and you have to look at it that way. And just like any other small business, be it someone doing drywall, construction, landscaping, whatever, they're going to have their ebbs and flows. They're going to have their ups and downs. They're going to have all kinds of costs. They got to buy shovels, lawnmowers, you name it, all those costs that they're going to have, and before they can make the good money, before they can get the profit. That's how this works too, guys. So you just have to, it's a mindset that you have to get into, and it can be very successful for you. And don't just look at the money. The money can be much, much better than company driver. It can also just be slightly better than a company driver. But look at the other benefits, the other freedoms and liberties that you get, and take those into consideration when making a decision. Because to me, the freedom to be able to run the truck the way that I want to run it, and take time off when I want to take time off, the way that I want to take the time off, run my routes the way that I want to run the kinds of loads that I want to run, get the fuel prices that I want to get, where I want to get, that all to me has an extraordinary value. So it's not just about the money, it's about freedom as well. So anyway, that's why I went lease, and like I said, I've never looked back. I've never had any regrets. Even right now, I'm broke down. I've been broke down for 4 days, sitting in a hotel that I have to pay for 4 days. Now that is a tax write-off, but even right now, going through what I'm going through right now, still would not go company. I would not. I have no regrets. I love being a lease driver for Prime, love running my truck as a lease truck, and I think it can work for a lot of people. I think you should not be afraid of it. One last thing I'll say, if you're asking yourself, well, should I go company for a year and then go lease? Maybe, but I saw all these posts about people saying, you don't know anything about the trucking industry, you should not lease a truck, you have no idea how to run your tires, you have no idea how to do all these things, you're stupid if you go lease. If you apply yourself in training, don't just try to crank those miles so you can get your own truck. I mean, really pay attention, really learn the business, understand the Prime fuel network and how customers, shippers and receivers work, understand the freight lanes, ask your trainer every question you can possibly think of. Soak it all in and really apply yourself to learn to become a professional driver during your TNT phase. And if you're truly ready at the end of that, you didn't just blow through it and not learn everything, but you soaked it all in and you learned it the proper way, then you're ready for a lease. I truly believe that. And that's how it worked with me. I was not ready until the last 2 weeks of my training. In that 2 weeks, I was running the truck 100%. Not a single, my trainer could have gotten off the truck. I would have had no problem running the truck perfectly and profitably those last couple weeks. And that's what made me convinced that I was ready to go to a lease. And I did, and I've been profitable ever since. So don't be afraid of it, guys. At the same time, don't feel pressured to do it. You can go company and then switch to lease later, or you can go to lease and switch back to company. So it's not like you're making a decision that can't be undone. I'm just saying don't be afraid of lease, and look at, weigh all the pros and cons, all the benefits and all the negatives. Just don't be afraid of it, guys. Don't read internet forums out there that are telling you that you're going to get screwed and that you're just going to be a slave and you're never going to be able to get out of the hole. It's not true, guys. You're not being locked into anything. You're not being forced into anything. There are a lot of very happy lease drivers, me being one of them. So anyway, like I said, my phone number is in the description below. Feel free to text me if you have any questions. You can leave comments here as well. And of course, check us out at driverlineup.com. As always, be safe out there, guys. Make good decisions and drive to thrive. Don't just drive to drive. Thanks, guys. Talk to you soon.